Okay, thank you very much for all of you to have come at 9:30. It seems the rumor in the building is that I've imposed French timing to a CPR seminar, so I apologize for that, but I thank you for having come so early. And I just want to really say a few words of introduction. I'm Marie-Hélène Zera. I am from the Institute of Research for Development. I've been working on Indian cities for a long time, and I'm deputy to the Center for Policy Research, which is a wonderful place to carry on research and to engage in policy dialogue. So, as you know, I mean, you've seen the flyer. This is a small roundtable, really a work in progress, and to discuss really important debates. And mainly what I think we would like to discuss today is two correlated important transformations which are at work right now. The first one is the evolution of electricity supply systems, which are, of course, pushed by the injunction towards decarbonization, but also, of course, the kind of technological changes that make this maybe potentially possible. And, of course, also the second strong transformation at work, and anybody who live in India, who is studying Indian cities, know that the nature of urban change is quite daunting, and it's very complex and not at all homogeneous. So this co-evolution of energy systems and urban change is, we feel, a bit understudied despite the importance of the phenomena. And it raises a certain number of interrelated questions, and I think if we can discuss this today, that'll be great. The first one is how the imperative of electricity or energy transition translate into cities, which are, and we all know that, a very high concentrated source of demand of the present, but also of the future. And how do cities, the ones that exist, but also the ones that will most probably grow in the next 20 or 30 years, will shape maybe this energy transition. So studying this co-evolution also, and I hope we are able to do this because today we've tried to have a dialogue with multiple stakeholders, also raises, I think, the question of the actors and the policies that could maybe shape some different pathways. So I just want to mention that, of course, and I think it will be debated in the presentation, that transition is not understood as a linear and apolitical concept at all. Transition is not necessarily a win-win situation. It can be conflictual. It can be taking different pathways. And this is in this sense that we understand the notion of transition, not at all like it can be done in technological studies where it seems like almost a progress towards something better. This is not how we understand transition here. And I will let, anyway, the speakers that are going to present an ongoing research project, which is an international comparison on a hybrid electric system. And I'm very happy, therefore, to welcome here Eric Verdet of Sciences Po Paris, who's heading this project and who's going to discuss it and present it, and Rémi de Bersegol from CNRS, but who's more familiar to India and to the CPR, who are going to be the core of the presenters in the first session, in which we will discuss research project and what we understand by energy transition and hybrid electric system. I also want just to thank as well Ankit very much, because in CPR there are different topics, different teams. I am very much affiliated with the urban team, and Ankit is working with the energy and climate team. And between these two teams, there's been lots of discussion at the CPR annual day, around a drink or in the stairs, very vibrant discussion, but we have never really tried to be able to interconnect our work, and I hope this seminar is a first step towards maybe more connection between these two teams, which are doing, I think, very interesting work at the CPR. And finally, before we start, I want to thank as well the Agence Française de Développement. When I started to think about this roundtable, I went to meet them. You will see when we go for lunch that it's really not very far across the road, so not very difficult to meet, but it was very heartening to see that they were very interesting to discuss with us, who are real academic researchers, and to try to set up a roundtable which also will hopefully engage with other stakeholders apart from academic. And I think before we start, I since the idea is really to have a debate and a workshop, I think we can just do a very, very short round of presentation. Just your name, maybe your organization, so that later, I would really like that this is open up to questions and debates, and so we know who we are. So I've just said, Marie-Hélène Zera, Institute of Research for Development, and CPR. And we go, yeah, I'm a lefty, so we'll go this way. It's more instinctive.
So my name is Augustin Delille. I work for the French Development Agency. Good morning.
Hi, good morning all. This is Sabyasachi Patnaik from Oracle Utilities, working on behavioral energy efficiency.
Hello, good morning everybody. My name is Rémi de Bersegol. I'm working with CNRS.
Hi everyone, I am Olivier, a CNRS researcher currently affiliated with CSH in Delhi and CPR. I work mainly on emerging disease in cities around Asia.
Hi, I'm Priya Srinivasan. I work with the Center for Science and Environment with the Renewable Energy team.
I am Prashant. I'm with CPR with the Urban Sanitation team.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bérénice Girard, and I just joined the Hybrid Elect project as a postdoctoral fellow.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Prasad, and I am from Tata Institute of Social Sciences. I'm just a graduate student, and I'm pursuing development policy. That's it.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Raju Ranjan Chaudhary. I am from Tata Institute of Social Science, Tuljapur, pursuing Bachelor in Social Work.
Good morning. My name is Ashwini Swain. I'm with Energy and Climate Team CPR, and I also work with Center for Energy, Environment and Resources.
Good morning. I'm Shrikant Dhuri, and I'm representing ISGF.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Theo Fried, and I work for Propaco. Is the Good morning, everyone. My name is Edward Salen, and I work with Augustin too on the IFD.
Hi, Parth Bhatia from the Climate Team at CPR.
I'm Pujarini Sen. I work at the Climate and Energy Team at KFS.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nishit Srivastava. I work with KFW. It's a German development bank. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Ankit from the Climate and Energy Team at CPR.
I'm Satyaki Bhattacharya from the Energy Team World Bank. A very good morning. I'm Dr. Shastri. I was formerly the Director General of National Institute of Solar Energy. Now I am working with one of our private organization called Max of Engineering. We are into the development of testing centers and certification center for solar energy. Thanks.
My name is Ajay Kapoor, working for same Max of Engineering and setting up a solar testing laboratory in New Delhi.
Good morning, I'm Donald Cannon from the European Investment Bank.
Good morning, I'm Cécile Martin-Phipps, and I'm working for the International Solar Alliance, although I'm French, because I've been sent by France a year ago.
Hello, good morning, this is Kedar here. I'm working for French Development Agency with Augusta.
Hi, I'm Radhika. I also work with the Osmosis Therapy.
Hi, I'm Federico, and I'm interning at CPR.
Okay, so we start, and so I do the master of fun, or yeah, okay, yeah, right. So Eric, you can start.
Thank you very much. So I am Eric Verdeil, a professor at Sciences Po and researcher at the CERI, the Center for International Research. So I'm going to present this research project that has started now for already 1 year, but we are really our regime is really mounting, and we are really starting to have the first fieldworks these months. So this presentation is more of an overview of the hypothesis that we have set up with my colleague Sylvie Jaglin from the labs at Paris Est University. So first of all, this research started as a response to the challenge number 2 from the French Research Agency about energy transition, and we noticed that they considered energy transition, of course, as a challenge, but also a very strong policy orientation advocated by many governments and international agencies, with the idea that we need to move toward low carbon energy, and we need to organize like a kind of technological convergence toward those new technologies. Our point of view, the way we started to think about this issue is based on researches in cities of the global south. I will say a word about that, and also as social scientists. And social scientists claiming that they should not be just downstream, discussing things like acceptability, the social impacts of technologies, but rather, as you just said, that technologies and society co-evolve, and we should not just consider technological change and then how people and society should adapt, but how also the transformation in society are probably changing and framing technological changes. And specifically, as geographers, we are very interested in the spatial dimension of transition, and among those spatial dimensions, of course, the urban changes that you just noticed, you just mentioned. It is also to be said that at the start of the 2000s, with Sylvie Jaglin and already Marie-Hélène Zera, we did a research in order to understand the first transformation, the first policies regarding energy transition in metropolis, a set of metropolis from the south. And we, of course, noticed several common issues like growth, demographic and economic growth, the state of the security of supply, poverty. However, we noticed also that at the time, no convergence around a specific set of energy policies could be noticed from one place to another one, being different continents, but also sometimes inside the same country. And also, we observed that energy issues were more and more felt as urban concerns, but the fact that it becomes an urban concern does not mean that we have territorialization at the urban level, meaning that most of the time energy policies are still decided by upper levels, like governments, sometimes international organizations, transnational firms, but urban authorities are not always very well involved in this transformation. So this is some of the points that we started with, and now I'm going to try to present the hypothesis that we are doing for this research, and specifically why we are thinking about exploring alternatives to the current organization of energy system, and specifically the energy grid. And this is, of course, because we observe persisting disruptions of electricity supply in many developing and emerging countries, and it should be stressed that it is not only a question of developing and, I would say, lagging behind countries, but also countries that are experiencing very strong economic growth are also experiencing these issues with electricity supply and more generally energy issues. Because of inadequate coverage of the grid, a very strong population and economic growth, And in many contexts, we observe power cuts, more or less chronic, load sheddings, and also general dysfunction of the electricity service. Whereas at the same time, high prices or increasing prices are also a cause for poor people being disconnected or not able to connect to the electricity grid. Public responses have usually focused on increasing electric output, of course, extending the grid, but in many contexts it is agreed that this is not enough, and this is not going fast enough because of issues of investment, of course, because also issues of coordination between various actors. Therefore, what is noticed from the looking from the ground is a lot of alternative responses that are emerging. Some of them are decentralized, individual, sometimes more collective. We look at the emergence of cooperatives, private entrepreneurs, setting up isolated or connected mini networks, mini grids. Some solutions are individual, like generators, diesel generators. Some are more solar-oriented. Some are using batteries. So there are, of course, a lot of changes and opportunities brought by technologies. And what is very clear is that this is happening not only in rural off-grid places, but also in cities that are exposed to frequent and chronic power cuts, and also the intermediate spaces around cities. So just to have an idea of what I'm speaking about, here I have just two images among many of the technologies and the systems that are emerging, like individual solar kits that, for instance, the Total French energy firm is developing mostly in Africa. I don't know if it's the case here in India. And we also have this organization with a lot of mini-grids. But just to give you a less theoretical approaches, let me introduce the case study of Lebanon, where I've been doing studies for many years, and where we find precisely all these very different solutions, some of them very well in line with this policy move toward a decarbonized solution, but other absolutely not. So you can see from these pictures the development of solar photovoltaic panels that are advertised in many contexts. But if you look on this image, this is a diesel. How can I come back? Okay. This is a diesel generator, and because of regular power cuts in Lebanon, they for more than 30 years have not been able to generate enough electricity, and it is cut from 6 to 12 hours a day, so it's a massive and chronic problem. So diesel generators are everywhere. This image is an initiative in a municipality, middle-sized municipality north of Beirut, the capital city. But everywhere you have those devices, and also this is also the case inside very big companies like this one or this one. What is new recently is that those hybrid diesel generators are coupled, articulated with the new the emergence of photovoltaic panels at a wider scale. So one of the things that is very interesting, as you see, is not the off-grid devices that are that usually we're working for autonomous firms or individuals or villages, but something that is in a way connected to the grid. And this is what we call hybrids, and that we want to explore in this research. So the question is, how are these alternative socio-technical arrangements initiated and organized in practice? That is, which actors, who pays, how is it regulated? To what extent are they sustained, expanded, scaled up to meet the diversity of users' demand? And if we take that, if we take stock of these new practices on the ground, what does it change for the electrical system in the long term? That is, how does it impact this idea of energy transition, thought of as a bottom, as a top, as a descending project that every cities and every country should adopt? How is it impacted by the emergence and the developing, I would say, the mushrooming of all those new technologies on the ground? So our idea is really to think together the co-evolution of local, very local energy supply systems and urban change. What do I mean by urban change? Precisely on the previous slide, you could see the emergence of peri-urban, middle-class communities, supermarkets, industrial zones, etc., etc. And all these clients, all these organizations need their proper and autonomous, or at least backup energy system. And this is the way the energy systems are built today. So this is not the conventional utilities that are planning the development, but we have both on the one side, the conventional system planned by a national, public, sometimes private utilities. It's not the question to debate the difference between public and private here, and the local initiatives that are needed by entrepreneurs and ordinary people on their side. So we have to understand this very complex assemblage of actors, very different technical objects, institutions, economic interests, social practices, and also representations that are contributing to change energy systems on the ground. So, just to conclude, two, three slides about the main approaches that already exist in the literature and that are trying to give interpretations for these changes, and how we challenge those initiatives and those approaches. First of all, there is a huge literature on off-grid devices and rural electrification. However, it is very rare to find analysis that think the moment when those off-grid rural electrification systems are, in the end, connected to the grid. What's happening at that moment? There are also in the literature what we call the post-network hypothesis, who are thinking, scholars who are thinking about decentralized autonomous systems and who look at the relation with energy transition. However, it has usually not been very well studied in very located, very situated context of the South. We also have been interested by the notion of infrastructuralization, so a process of transformation of local infrastructural system through the stabilization, the sustaining of their operation and extension and generalization, when they reproduce the same basic unit at ever larger spatial and social scales, and combining different elements. So this hypothesis of infrastructuralization is, as you will see, at the basis of our own approach. So what we call hybridization. Hybridization is something that is already existing in the literature, but we are contending with different other approaches. Some consider hybridization as something absolutely new, and we reject this approach, and also we reject the opposition between hybrid as something located in or outside networks organization. We also want to go beyond people thinking about what they call incremental infrastructure or delivery palliative that are very individual solutions, usually marked by instability. What we consider hybridization is a very long-lasting process of electrification where we have configuration that are fueled by the emergence of off-grid devices and logic of unachieved infrastructuralization. What I mean is that we have all these processes of scaling up that are happening in different places, in different moments, and that we have to take into consideration altogether. So we have like a diversity of ways to access to electricity supply that allows for meeting the need and the possibilities of various end users, and the specific material and the geographical embeddedness of those solutions are very important to take into consideration. So here we are focusing on collective solutions that are socially very structuring. This is not just individual solutions, that's what I mean. They are technically complex, so it's not just one small device working on its side. And this is something that will last for a long time, or we make that assumption at least. And this may be something that should be discussed later. Instead of converging toward one energy system where renewable energies are having a greater role, we are making the hypothesis that we go toward increased diversification, increased heterogeneity of those systems. And of course, there are many challenges associated with the resilience of those systems because of their heterogeneity. And also, it's very difficult to make analysis of this system because of their great diversity, which implies to make a lot of field studies in order to understand how they are set up and how do they evolve, and sometimes with different logics locally. So the contextual factors are very strong. And in the end, how is it changing those transition pathways? So as a conclusion, and I'm not commenting that, I just want to stress that we have identified at least 5 or 6 geographic configuration, urban contexts, among which a series of Indian contexts that maybe in the discussion my colleague will be able to present. And what I just want to stress is that we have a range of, or a continuum of situations that we want to analyze. Some of them are located in cities where electricity is not working very well. Other are more in peripheries, urban peripheries, which are now experiencing urbanization and access to energy and modern energy. So we have all these different situations that where we find we can locate and identify and discuss this idea of hybrid electricity configuration. So it was like a small and a first introduction to our hypothesis. It is an hypothesis. It is going to be discussed, and I hope this will nurture the discussion with you in particular. And to close, I would like to thank very much the CPR and Marie-Hélène Zera for organizing this event, and also AFD, because they, and specifically the Paris organization, helped a lot and supported the event because they were interested in looking at these ideas and how it is working on the ground. So this is the meaning of my coming here.
Right? So I think Remy is going to talk about something that we don't often think of transition, right? Which is really the manner in which many people in the Global South do access electricity services on the ground. And hopefully it will open up some debates on the question of transition and equity.
Hello everyone. So thank you for being here. My presentation is about Nairobi and slum electrification in Nairobi. It's not directly linked with the previous presentation, which was dealing about hybridization. So, but it's also linked with it because it raises the same issue. Once you want to expand the grid, and for different reasons the grid is not expanding fast enough to reach the population, then something else is happening. And I've been looking at this slum electrification project in Nairobi, in Kibera, one of the biggest slums in Kenya, with this science and technology perspective, which means, like Eric presented just before, I believe that technology and society co-evolve together. So the infrastructural choices which are made in the periphery, like for slum electrification, are not neutral choices. It means something about the society. So just quickly, in Kenya you have like 56% of electrification in 2016. According to the last census in Nairobi, you have 72.3% of electrification. And you cannot see it very well on the map, but this electricity rate in Nairobi is very unequal according to the different world. Where you are living, you can have an access to electricity or not. In reality, this unequal access to electricity in Nairobi is mainly because 60% of the population lives in slum, and especially in unplanified settlement. There is this colonial legacy, of course, of the historical segregation. There is a legal issue because slum dwellers are squatters, so for the providers, the Kenya Power Lighting Company, it's difficult to be able to legally connect these people to the grid. And of course, because of this slum population, it's expensive for them to pay the connection cost. So as a result, there was only 20% of electricity in slum in Nairobi. And I've been looking at slum electrification project in Kibera. So there is a small arrow on the map. It is in the center of Nairobi. Kibera is around 200,000 inhabitants according to different surveys, but some people are claiming that there is 1 million of inhabitants, so it's difficult to have like proper statistics because per definition, these people are not on the map. They are like black area of the master plan of Nairobi. But in 2014, there was a new electrification project in Kibera implemented by the Kenya Power Lighting Company. So I've been looking at that with mostly ethnographic method with 3 different fieldwork, one in September 2014, end of Jan, beginning of March 2015, and I came back October 2015. So it's like 3 years old survey, which has just been published this year. Well, actually, if you enter Kibera, officially there is no electricity, but actually there is electricity. People are using electricity. You have people are using TV, fridge, lights, heater, electric cook stove, sound system, etc. You find everything. Why? Because there is this practice of electricity poaching. It's not legal, but electricity is supplied by some local cartels who poach electricity illegally and resell it. So users can pay like 200 to 500 shilling a month to get unlimited access to this electricity, which is informal and which is considered as illegal. So it became so popular in Kibera that people call it this system, this informal system of supplying electricity illegally, the Kibera Power Lighting Company, because that's the name of the slum, in reference to the Kenya Power Lighting Company. So it's very common. Actually, everybody has an access to electricity in the non-legally connected area. But this is not legal. So this is Patrick. He is one of the poacher, one of the reseller, so selling electricity around. For him, the transformer from where he is poaching electricity is his. The transformer is ours. We have an informal agreement, deal, with KPLC engineer. He regularly pays 20,000 Kenyan shilling a year to have an access. Of course, it's not legal, it's not official, but like this, he can connect by giving 20,000 shilling to the engineer. He can connect to the transformer. So he connects the 3-phase, and he brought the 3 phases to his house. He can supply 20 users on 1 phase each, and he keep actually 1 phase free in case of some problem with 1 phase. Like this, he can shift from 1 phase to another. Like this, he can ensure a good supply to his customer. What was interesting is that for the inhabitants, Patrick is providing a needed service as he fills a gap in the absence of legal electricity. KPLC cannot connect people in the slum, so there is something else happening. Patrick is there. Patrick is one of the dealers. There are many dealers in Kibera. And so while I was asking question about, this practice of electricity poaching, people were saying, okay, don't say we are thieves stealing electricity. At least Patrick is doing something useful for us. He is working and helping us. KPLC has not done anything for us in years. KPLC just realized that we are here because it was the beginning of the project. So in the slum, it appears to be a business as any other business, per definition informal, because we are in a slum. But people, most of the time, they appreciate their provider, and they can shift from one provider to another if the supply is not good. So some people were explaining that, okay, if this supplier is not good, then I will shift to another. They are not captive. And because some suppliers do not provide a very good quality service, when they have 100 customers, then they are not able to provide a good quality service. So what was the official argument for slum electrification, which basically means to remove these illegal wires? There is a political promise in Kenya, within Kenya Vision 2030. The government promised to have 100% of electrification all over Kenya, in rural area as well as in urban and slum area. And, following this sustainable development goal, so they want to, by 2030, to have like 100% connection. There is a technical problem with this electricity poaching because for the engineer it's difficult to manage peak hours. If you design a transformer for this amount of the population, but in reality you have much more people who are connected to this transformer, then during peak hours it will damage the transformer. And of course it's dangerous. The way Patrick is doing the wiring system in the slum is not following any norms. So sometimes you have electrocution, fires, etc. And it's also a commercial issue for the operator, for Kenya Power Lighting Company, because whatever this slum is using, they are not paying for it. And KPLC is on the local Nairobi Stock Exchange market since few years now, so they are supposed to, manage their grid efficiently from a financial and commercial perspective. So the Kenya Slum Electrification Program is very original because this is actually the third time that KPLC is doing that kind of regularization scheme in the slum. And the two first times they faced a lot of suspicion, reject, and violence from the slum dwellers. And the last time it was not even possible anymore for the KPLC engineer to enter the slum because they were getting beaten up by the population, by the cartel, so it was very complicated. Since 2014, the strategy has changed, so now it's relying on subsidizing the connections thanks to the World Bank loan. So now the connection costs only $15 against $350 before. They are involving community leaders to act as mediation intermediaries between KPLC and the inhabitants. And they are installing this prepayment meter. You have to recharge in advance in order to access electricity. So basically, they have in practice they have constituted a protection team. So William, which is one of the local leaders, is a pastor well respected in Kibera, has recruited few youth who are not doing anything because there is no job when you are living in a slum. It's difficult to survive. To constitute what they call a protection team to protect the engineers when they enter the slum. And they have also, and that's very clever stuff, they have also recruited some of the cartel's members. So people like Patrick's were approached. Not all of them. That's one of the issues. But few of them will join this protection team, which means that they were able to negotiate and enter the slum in order to remove these illegal wires. So William was saying, our role is to prevent conflicts by presenting the benefit of the program to the population. Families just want a decent life, they want recognition and job for their children. I'm explaining why KPLC can contribute to bring that change. And it's more or less working because there is very less resistance during the special day when they remove, like you can see on these pictures, the illegal wires, which were like literally everywhere in Kibera, so it was going underground. It was hidden everywhere, but during this operation, there was less violence. And William was saying, okay, without our mediation and the protection of the police during the removal, because during special day when they are removing the illegal wires, the police is coming. They are not entering in the small alley, but they are on the main road of the slum, just in case. So they deal with the violence associated with the removal of illegal wires. They deal with the poachers and the inhabitants who are opposed to the project. Of course, there is this approach, and there is also some technology adapted to the situation. To avoid the stealing of the wire, they shift from copper to aluminum, because aluminum is much cheaper. Otherwise, people were cutting the wire and doing something, recycling it to do something, reselling it later on. To avoid the non-payment, they have installed this system of prepaid meter with a digital pad. You can see it. And to avoid the tampering of the meter and conflictual disconnection, they have actually put the meter on the top of this pylon. The meter actually is not down in front of the house, but it's impossible to reach it because it is locked in a box on the top of the pylon. And yes, but actually its technology is contested, and it was already possible to bypass it in February 2015. So they call it they call it Kibera Brain, like Kibera Power Lighting Company. Some people inside the slum were already able to tamper the meter. They succeed to get the key from the box where there is a meter. They succeed to study how this meter is done, and they succeeded to trick the system to have electricity for free, basically without paying. So as I was saying in my introduction, slum electrification is more than just giving electricity to the poor. There is also a meaning, a societal meaning in a slum electrification project. And with this project, you can see it as a formalization, yes, but a formalization of consumers, because these people are consuming electricity, but of poor consumers. And when you go inside the alley where these meters have been installed, it has not been installed everywhere in Kibera, but when you enter Kibera, it is there more or less, like it covers 70% of Kibera. You hear this sound, beep, 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 beep. That's the sound of the meters which need to be fed. You need to buy token. But because we are talking about a very poor slum, people can't really afford it. So they don't use the meter. There is 50 units which is offered at the beginning. So they use these 50 units, and one is over, they do not recharge it. So one of the local leaders from Machimoni, which is one of the villages in Kibera, in the center of Kibera, was saying, the systems divides the community into groups, the wealthy who can afford it and the poor who can't. For this later, bypassing is an act of legitimate resistance. Believe me, this system won't last long. The poor are dominant here. Because with this meter, you can see it as a willingness to depoliticize the disconnection and the connection. You have electricity if you pay. If you don't pay, there is no room for negotiation. It's automatically cut. And in the area where it has been installed, it was interesting to notice that people are going back to charcoal, because when you have electricity for a fixed rate, a flat rate, 500 shilling, then you are using electricity basically for everything, lighting, TV, but also cooking. So people were cooking on this, as you can see on the photography on the left, on this electric cook stove, because when you are living in a tiny, small room in a slum, this is very convenient. It doesn't produce any smoke and all that. So this woman, Elizabeth, was saying, since I removed my informal connection a few weeks back, I stopped to use electricity cook stove in the room, which was convenient because it doesn't produce any smoke. I'm now using kerosene for tea and charcoal for cooking outside. For the time being, I'm using the prepared only for lighting in the evening. Then we will see. And so that's a paradoxical effect of this expansion of the grid legally, which actually reinforces off network. We can maybe make a link to this hybridization problematic. And you can see that in Kenya, the use of charcoal is paradoxically increasing in urban area with expansion of electricity, which is paradoxical. Because simply charcoal is the cheapest urban household cooking fuel. Sorry, it costs $12,000, so $141 per year, compared to 31 for gas and 59,000 for electricity. This is 2012 figures. And so the Energy Regulatory Commission in Kenya is actually drafting a new legislation for this charcoal problematic, which became prominent with the urbanization. You can see also this slum electrification project as a formalization of citizenship. These people are now considered as citizens because they will have to pay their electricity like any other citizens in the city. But maybe it's discriminatory because it's based on this ability to pay. And there is already a debate, I won't go into details about it, but about prepayment, which is framed between pro and against prepayment. So some critical analysts are saying that prepayment imposes an unfair and unwanted metrological scrutiny, instilling calculation as the essential ethos of citizenship. People have to think, okay, I will be using electricity for that, I need to pay in advance. And instead of encouraging full citizenship rights and self-determination, prepayment discriminate against the poor, seeking to discipline and punish unruly citizens. And I believe that this is true for the case of Kibera. This Foucauldian perspective about the state, using its biopower to control the population, I mean, it makes sense in Kibera. And so Anjiri, a woman from Machimoni, So one of these villages in the center of Kibera was saying what KPLC didn't understand is very simple. We are poor people, and we are surviving in a hole. Machimoni means hole in Swahili. Look around you. It's machimoni. Every day is already a struggle. And they really think that we will pay for more for having less. So you find people, so that kind of narratives in Kibera which relate to the debate against prepayment. But at the same time, despite contestation and conflicts, some inhabitants consider that this electrification scheme is a regularization of the right to live in the city, despite staying in an informal settlement with unclear land tenure statute, like I was saying. They are paying their electricity consumption like any other citizens. So the same woman was saying, at least they, the Kenya Power Lighting Company, understood that we are not animals. So I will conclude on this. Slum electrification is more than just giving electricity to the poor. You can apprehend this expansion of the grid, the extension of the network, legal network, as a micro geopolitic issue. Because the regularization of electricity reflects the willingness of the state to integrate historically segregated and uncontrolled spaces like this slum, like Kibera, by putting them under its control. Through the electricity, the state will think, okay, we are here. And we want to put into order this slum, which we were not considering before. Ouais, j'arrive. So the modalities of expansion of the slum electrification program through the co-production and adapted technology, despite its ambivalence, it weakens the possibility of civil contestation. But the permanent practice of electricity poaching to access electricity is a revelator of the continuous power struggles in the making of the city. So I will conclude on that. And this struggle can be very violent. At my return in Kibera in September 2015, Steve, so one of these mediators, one of these young people who is working with William, has been severely injured by during a fight with machete. So when they are not happy in Kibera, they are fighting with machete. So he was cut here, he was cut on the head. And last week I gave a call to a friend in Kibera about, so how is it working now? And he was telling me that the Kibera Power Lighting Company, so this informal electricity poaching system, is still working better than ever through another underground network system, and the use of the prepaid is apparently almost inexistent now. So that's a failure. I will conclude on this just with a picture of Patrick's, which shows the creativity and the jugad, we can say, of these people living in slum, because you need a neutral, when you have electricity, you need to have a neutral also, to maintain the system. So he's taking the neutral, he's putting on the soil, and he's adding a mix of water and salt, and thanks to that, but the system is functioning. I mean, he can provide electricity for 40 users, kind of mediocre, but okay quality. So, thank you very much. I'm done.
Okay, so thank you very much. I think both presentations have raised a number of questions, and I think it was very interesting to see the paradoxical effect that grid expansion can have, and how I think your case is a great case of how people can contest technology. So I think I will open it to the floor for questions and comments, and I think maybe the best is to take 3 or 4 questions or comments at the same time, and then you answer, and then we have a second round. So please raise your hand if you have any questions or comments. Or shall I start?
So for those who wants to see the article, it has just been published in this journal. So you have all the details of the survey and the project. So there was a question?
Yeah, Prashant, you have a question? You can start.
Yeah, this is for Remy. Just a comment and a question, I guess. So the comment is, it's interesting that you are saying how co-production actually weakens the possibility of civil contestation. Because traditionally, I mean, I think in the existing literature on co-production, we normally see co-production as almost enhancing the community's voice, or a citizen's voice in the production and delivery of services. So maybe if you could unpack that a little more, and how you chose this cartel, how this cartel was chosen by the state or by the utility to enhance the delivery of services. And the second question is just very simply on the prepayments point that you raised. Was prepayments mandated for the residents, or was that an option they were given?
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. So about this co-production, yes, but in that case, it was really a strategy, and I use the word strategy, of KPLC to weaken this contestation, because the two-other scheme, as I told you, it went completely mad, and people, the engineers, were not able anymore to enter the SLUM. But in 2012, you got this devolution reform, which are similar to the decentralization reform in India, and in the contrary of India, electricity, energy became a local subject. And in this slum area, people are voting. They are still Kenyan citizens, so they have a representative, member of consultancy assembly, who agrees to work with KPLC. And thanks to that guy, he acts as an intermediary, and he's the one who found this William. And William and his team of protection team, is young people, were going every day to explain to the inhabitants, okay, the engineer will come again, like 3 years back, but do not beat them, because we have explained them. We will remove the illegal wires just after we will, the prepayment will be installed. So you won't be without electricity. There will be no transition, first. Secondly, don't be violent with them, because at the end, with a new legal network, we will need some maintenance, and this could be done with a team of young people, and so we will, they will have a job, and so please do not, beat up the engineer. And so they've been thinking about this, to weaken the resistance, and for them, involving the community was really a way to, was a way to avoid this. But it was not really empowering the people at real, because people were not asking for this. It's not. I mean, it's a strategy from the government, and people were happy with this electricity poaching anyway. So they're using co-production for this. Yeah.
So it's still very much like, so rather than going out to the community and asking them for feedback, it was still very much a top-down urban governance kind of strategy, where the local MLA or the equivalent there chose these representatives because they aligned with his agenda.
Yes, exactly. But the problem with this strategy, the equivalent of the MLA, when the new election came up, he went to see the Kenya Power Lighting Company, telling them, okay, you will have to fund this project, which were not related to electrification. Basically, it was new roads, it was sewer system in the main road. Otherwise, I'll tell my people to remove all your system. And so they were able to enter the slum thanks to him. At the same time, they have been more or less kicked out because of this political agenda. About prepayment, no, it's, as I have already answered, no, it's not at all a demand from the people. But if you go out of Kibera, this prepayment system is working pretty well. In the non-slum area, in the middle class and lower middle class, because now it has been spread all over Nairobi, people are very happy with it, because they can control their consumption, yes. They are not obliged to share the bill with their neighbor, because before there was some 1 meter for different families. So they are quite happy with it. This prepayment scheme is not working in very poor area like Kibera, but otherwise it was a demand of the population, like lower middle class are very happy with it.
Some more question?
Hi, this is for Remy again. Just correct me if I'm wrong, but my takeaway from this is that pretty much the only advantage you get from subscribing to this is this formalization of being able to reside in the city. Is that right?
That's
As in, you get to formally be recognized
Yes.
as a resident.
yes.
And what does it entail in comparison to being illegal? Is it like tenancy rights? I mean, what does this formalization bring?
It's about stigmatization. Like people living in slum are considering themselves they think that people are considering themselves as animals, like one of these women was saying, and they are stigmatized because they think that people consider themselves as thieves, stealing, and not working, not doing anything. People in Kibera are actually working, and they don't consider themselves as thieves, stealing, because they just don't have the choice. So among the population that I've been meeting, like some inhabitants were very happy of this scheme because they were happy to see that at least the government now is looking at us and taking into account our lives, and they don't just let us live in that shitty hole, they call it like this, which is Matrimony or Kenda in Kibera.
So this is this is a non-tangible sort of advantage as such. It doesn't actually provide any legal sort of add-ons.
So that's something like in India. Once you can prove that you are paying a bill since 1 or 2 years, it's the beginning of recognition of your land tenure statute. So for them, that's quite positive. But just paperwork. Yeah, that's the same problematic as in India. Yeah.
What is the extent of the magnitude of the energy requirements for these people? Is that keeping aside the heating, because heating is very high, huge energy consumption. If it is, can it be solved by the decentralized type of applications, like some sort of home lights with a larger module size or something like that?
So the requirement is not so much actually, because they use if we take apart electric cookstoves, they use electricity for one room. Most of them they are living in one room.
A fan and
light,
TV?
fan, and TV. Some of them have fridges, but it's very rare. So there are not so much. Even the KPLC people were telling me that actually the amount of electricity which is stolen is very little. For them, they don't really mind it so much. For KPLCs, they want this electrification to prove that they have connected 100%, to respect the political agenda. But the amount of electricity is less. So we can imagine some alternatives to the grid. I've seen people a little bit using solar, but it's very rare. You will find it mostly in the periphery of Nairobi, but not really inside the slum. I've seen people using a little bit LPG, but it's very difficult for them to afford the first. When you buy the system at first, it's expensive. But one solution, I believe, for this formalization would be to work really with. Don't find for any other alternative in terms of technological alternative, but work with Patricks, because they have recruited some of the cartel members to negotiate with the other cartel members. But you could imagine that it would be possible to replicate the same system which is actually working for water. For water, like you have in India, in slums, you have user group connection. And we could imagine the same system in Kibera. One transformer is legally delegated to Patrick, and Patrick has to follow some norms and pay a kind of rent to KPLC, which is already more or less existing, but without following any norms because it's not recognized. And so that's
actually that a kind of jugaad and that type of things you are shown. It's very dangerous because there is a neutral. You are taking the neutral from the ground. The way they were working out.
Yeah, so
it could be
because there is no norms.
Problem.
If there was some norms, if Patrick's was given this transformer legally with a contract, he would be obliged to respect the norms.
So instead of a legal connection, you can have a home light. The voltages are low. There is no voltage problem. The electrical shock problems. And the next thing is, it is an individual, so they will love it. They love their own systems. The individual, ownership will come up, and then they will do a perhaps much better job. That is what I feel. And these things may not cost much actually. Home lighting system and the cost. And so that's maybe perhaps.
Yes, there might be some technological solution to find out. But for sure, if you do not include these cartels people, any project will fail at the end. So you have to find a way to integrate them to ensure that the system will be working. But yes, there might be some other technological solution that we could think about. I was thinking also maybe if people have batteries that they could recharge, like it's actually happening. So it will be the same thing like water. So okay, it's not the same quality of service than in middle class area, but still it will be better and it will be functioning. So there are many options possible, I think, from a technological point of view.
I think there's 1, 2, and 3. So we start from you, then at the back, and we take 3 in a row, and Ankit to finish. And 4, okay? I mean, we'll see. I mean, otherwise you come in next round. Ankit will speak later. Yeah.
Firstly, thank you so much for the interesting presentations. And so I work with Shakti Sustainable Energy Foundation, working on the energy access space. And this directly aligns with the work we have been trying to do with different states, being UP, Bihar, on developing policies to promote this hybridization, promoting mini-grid projects. And so I totally agree that hybridization is the need of the hour, and it is presently happening at the urban context and is being thought about at the rural and the off-grid space. But one key issue that we have been facing in our entire 3 to 4 years of work is that the government perception around it. So the government always thinks of electricity as a binary solution. It is either grid electricity or decentralized energy solutions. It is never seen as an and solution. Both of them working together is never the approach. If you see the present scenario also, we're 100% village electrification, the targets are of 100% household electrification. The entire context around including decentralized solutions into that in the Indian context is somewhere missing, and this entire change in perception is what is a problem that we deal with. I am not very sure was that part of the research that has been carried out till date, but it will be very helpful to understand what was your experience maybe in Kenya when this, because what I understand in this case study also, there was the poaching electricity system already taking place, but then the government decided, or the electricity distribution utility decided that they want to enter that area and that facility, and they decided to take off what was the existing electricity illegal systems. But consider an example of rural areas in India. If we already have mini grid players or these decentralized systems working in these rural areas, and then the grid is extended, what will be the scenario? How will the two work together? So we have been working, and what we feel is technically it is possible. Maybe regulatory and policy changes will be required, but the change in perception or the acceptance of them together is a struggle that we are facing with, and I'll be happy to maybe receive your thoughts around it, because the DISCOM or the distribution utilities see these decentralized solutions as a loss of revenue for them. They're losing their consumers, they're losing their legal or their hold over the entire society. So happy to have your points on it.
My question is directed to Riley. In the context of this presentation, you have explained that this electrification program is not sustaining really. In the context of urban sociology, I would like to ask one question, because this paper says local politics. That means power relations between the communities in Canberra. So in that when a public good is tend to introduce in a community or anywhere, it's the community which plays a role in that getting that public goods. So in that context, there was a study by IIM Bangalore professor how community affects the public goods. So in that context, I would like to know from the Canberra point of view, because this area is more of tribeships, means lot of tribes. So they are different communities. So when they deal with the state, they have a different power relations. And this Canberra, is it a heterogeneous community or homogeneous community? Because that plays main role in the getting the public goods from the state. So that I would like to know from this paper.
My question is to Eric. So Eric, you were giving an example of this case study for Lebanon on this hybrid DG plus solar rooftop systems. So I would also like to ask you that are these some kind of studies have been also done for India? Because in India we also have close to 70 to 100 gigawatts of DG systems installed, and are currently the solar rooftop sector is currently struggling. So once this diesel mitigation, DG plus rooftop systems can be installed together, something for India can also be developed. That will be good. So I would like to know your views on this.
What is the source for your 70 to 100 gigawatt? Okay. I can also I can ask later if you want. Okay. Okay. I can ask. So my question is around this. Yeah. Okay. So this question is for Eric, but also Remy can reflect. There's this tension around decentralization and centralization. Right? I think Remy's study especially focused on the very local politics of electricity provision, while the hybrid kind of framework talks about perhaps these two coming together. There is this kind of tendency to think about renewables as pushing forward a more decentralized way to provide electricity. But from our experience in India, at least, a lot of the provision of renewables is actually a centralized act, and also the fact that if you are putting renewables in the grid, you actually need an extremely robust centralized system to manage that. So the question is around not necessarily emerging institutions, but how are conventional centralized electricity institutions managing this transition? How are they morphing themselves to figure out these new spatializations of energy? That's my thanks.
Okay, thank you very much for your questions, and I try to answer you at the same time, because I think you touch on the same issue in a way. Indeed, this idea of hybridization is something that is happening underground. Sometimes it's like a makeshift solution where we see local engineers, electricians that know quite well how to make things together technologically. But in the case of Lebanon, for instance, this is something that has come up on a very informal way, at the start at least. So because of power cuts have always been thought as a temporary situation, the government and the utility managers always consider the generators as something, okay, we tolerate that at the moment, but we are working toward 24 hours a day electricity soon. But this has been the discourse for like 20 years, and things have not changed. And even worse, I would say that the generator systems, so the alternative systems, have really increased, developed, and it started as individual solutions in home. Now it has become for very big buildings, for entire neighborhoods where people are serving 200 people. You have seen those big companies, supermarkets, industries, etc. So the generator system, still informal, is becoming more and more regulated. Local municipalities now have an eye on it because they are using the municipal poles and the municipal grid, and the Ministry of Electricity, of Energy, is publishing every month recommended prices for a service that is illegal, and the people are not paying taxes. So you see the kind of paradox. And in a way, this informal system is becoming, from the bottom up, becoming more and more embedded in the existing and more conventional system. And therefore, it is interesting to see the shifts in representation inside, among NGOs, international organizations, and even the ministry. And so you have now new programs usually kind of the result of international cooperation between the UNDP, for instance, and an NGO working very closely with the Ministry of Energy in Lebanon, and they are promoting what they call these hybrids, and they have a specific. They are using a part of the transition, energy transition agenda to give conventional loans, subsidized loans to companies to achieve this kind of target. So we see now a shift among those representatives. Only the national utility are still really against this move. When you discuss with them, they say, no, it's too dirty, and we really want to, we prefer to go for a big solar project, centralized one if you want, so a project with 1 mega, 10 mega, and becoming increasing. So in a way, it's a competition between two approaches, and I think we have to also understand that as a competition between two policy paradigms. One that is probably more realistic and also acknowledge the necessity to accommodate this informal system. The other one that is pushing for still a more centralized and so a system that they can more control on their side. So I think it is a power issue inside the power sector. Now I just want to shift, and this will be also a question for Remy in a way, or a comment. I think that the case study you presented indeed shows the limitations and the difficulties in implementing those systems with a prepayment system, specifically in very poor context. And one of the questions that I was wondering, it was like what you asked, was about the homogeneity, heterogeneity of the community. Not just regarding poor and less poor people, but also the question of businesses, small businesses. Because I think that if we take this issue of economic development seriously, then we have to think about also how even very small entrepreneurs what are their electric needs, and are they pushing, for instance, for other alternative systems? Are they accepting prepayment or not? Or are they pushing for their own generated electricity? Are they buying storage devices like batteries, etc., which now are possible? And so I think those small entrepreneurs might be some of the actors that may be involved in the changes, also the representational changes on the ground.
Okay. Thank you for these questions. So maybe first I can answer on this heterogeneity of the community and businesses. And so in Kibera you have like different tribes, different ethnic. You have the Luya, the Luo communities, the Kikuyu communities, the Nubian communities. Kibera means forest in Nubian language, and it was given by the during the colonization by the British to the Nubians soldiers who were, fighting with the British. And I'm beginning by that because this is linked to that question at the end. There have been some riots and fight between the Kikuyu and Luo and Luyo community after the presidential election of 2000. It will come back later. I don't know exactly. I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was a huge riot in Kibera because the Kikuyu were the one who succeeded to get the land informally through the Nubians, and they were renting out the rooms to the Luo and the Luyo communities. And when the presidential election came up and the Kikuyu president came into power, the Luyo went mad against their landlords, the Kikuyu, and kicked them out of the slum. So basically, in Kibera now it's mostly Luo and Luya community, and Kikuyu are very, very less because they've been kicked out.
And the Nubians, the first one who were in Kibera, are living in the margin of Kibera, which are basically lower middle class area, but which are like a little bit more better off than the majority of Kibera. And so there is 4 MCA, so local representatives elected in Kibera, and 4 of them they are either Luyo or Luo. And so there is no more these conflicts between tribes and ethnies, because now, since the riot, Kibera has become very homogenized, So you still find some Kikuyu. One of that guy from the protection team was a Kikuyu. But it's very less, it's mostly Luo and Luyo now. And yes, so in the way they are approaching electrification, I mean, this ethnicity plays a role, but I did not apprehend it like like a very strong link. I mean, it's not a barrier, So people are supporting Patrick not because he's also a Luo, but because he's providing electricity. Basically, so kind of pragmatism. Even if this ethnicity is very important in Kenya, and at least for this electricity, I did not feel it as as strong as it could have been before because of this homogenization of the slum. Regarding small businesses, yes. So also I did not look into details into it, but the few businesses I've been to, I remember seeing like battery. So people were charging battery like a bar. Small scale kind of factories that are using battery. So I believe that will be one, maybe one of they could lead the change through this battery system could be working. But I did not see any other technological alternative related to electricity. As I said before, solar was very less, but yes, battery I saw few batteries. Yeah. But otherwise, electricity, these small businesses were very unhappy with the prepaid meter because they will be paying much more. And so they really want to keep working with Patrick. I mean, Patrick is a metaphor. There is not only Patrick. Because they have an agreement. They know him since 20 years. It's working like this since 20 years. He provides them a service. So there is this conflictual... I mean, they are loyal to him because he's providing a service and allows them to work, and he is loyal to them also because they're the same customer since 10, 20 years. So, no, they were not very, very unhappy of the prepayment because it's basically a matter of ability to pay and they can't afford it. And maybe a last word about this, your question, like this post-network and centralized network disconnection. People are not. Government doesn't want to merge it together, like CSC or GIZ. I mean, all these alternative out-of-the-box solutions that that kind of institution proposes. I found it very, very interesting, and I can understand from the government point of view when you have engineers who have been raised and who learn their work in a centralized manner, that it's difficult for them to shift and think differently. But also, there is, when we talk about this hybridization or post-network, which is not the same thing, but it raises also some similar issue, I think, in terms of the quality of the service and what will be the impact on the making of the city. Because if you formalize alternatives where the grid is not extended, there is nothing. So, okay, it's better to recognize these alternatives, try to. But if it becomes a mediocre solution for second-class citizens, so you have a second-class service, then it raises some political and maybe even philosophical issue that we are not questioning maybe enough. So technology is one, but we have to ensure that it doesn't formalize inequality just for the sake of entering the statistics that we have 100% of electrification because we provide few solar systems to this marginalized area. You know what I mean? There is also this question to think about. I have no answer because I'm not an engineer, but I have this
think about it. Like not only for electricity, but sanitation, water, you'll find the same problematic.
Remy, we are talking about programs, we are talking about case studies, but I kind of partially agree with Ankit when say that until unless the utility or the policymakers of the country or the region are not on board, so maybe a program can be successful, maybe a case study for the limited period in time would be able to, but if you want to do it in a sustainable basis, then the kind of the government or the utility needs to be on board for this particular. When you talked about Eric about the kind of the conflict between the national grid and the program, so that's what I'm kind of trying to address, that until unless they are on board, it can be restricted to any one of the case studies. It can't be rolled out on a wide scale basis, or so to say, kind of restricted to a certain period and program. So to make it in large scale basis, what are the things which you think it has been done to make it sustainable and for a long period in time? That is what I would like to know.
Well, I think that precisely the point is how and to what extent governments can join in such initiatives. The first point is that governments are, and also national utilities, very often very optimistic about their capacity to achieve very ambitious targets. And when we, as a researcher, go on the field, we see that usually it's not that smart and not that bright than the 100%, etc. And after 2 years, it goes back, etc. So I think that one point that may drives them into joining such initiative is that first, now I would say technologies that are less dirty than the other ones, like the diesel generators. This is something that is very smoky, that is very very unhealthy, etc. So this is something people are now becoming more interested in solar panels, in batteries, etc. And these new technologies are more acceptable also by technologies, etc. by companies, and it's also a way to include private companies into the system. Second point, well, when you say how can we make the system sustainable, and precisely this notion of sustainable is an ambiguous way of thinking. It is because is sustainable something that is just healthy and ecological or environmental friendly, or is it something that lasts? But what does it mean to last in a context that is really changing very much from the socio-economic side, from the material side, etc. So it's also a way, what I say, and what the people are already doing, I mean businesses and people, middle class and lower middle class people on the ground, they are saying we cannot wait until it becomes really sustainable. And so it's a way to accompany change and to just make things work in between, And so I think we have also to take into consideration this temporariness that becomes a lasting process.
Is there any other question? Or which turn do you want to? Yeah.
Hi. So this question is to Remy. I just wanted to ask you. So you've mentioned that the community in Kibera, one benefit that they got was formalization in some form of moving on to this the KPLC provided system. But could you talk a little bit about whether the formal system had any quality improvements in power supply, and were they noticeable to the community? And if they were, then was this not a strong enough incentive for them to desire a formal electricity supply? Thanks.
Basically, what I have seen that what I could understand from this presentation on the Kenyan slum is basically it was a case of more of a confrontation than collaboration with the people who were already doing some work and at a reasonable way to serve the particular society or the community. So instead of confrontation, as you correctly told earlier also, that can we find out ways in which we can collaborate with those people? Because putting somebody means like we have made a person, William, who was against the whole industry of Patrick. So that will basically not sustain for a long time until unless whatever we are providing or whatever the utility is providing is much better than what Patrick is providing. So that is number one. Second thing is, can they think something out of box? Because such type of problem, they need some out of box solution. Something like, say, what I have seen from the photograph is like most of the roofs are tin shed roofs, and is it possible to procure solar panels in bulk, and the cost towards that procurement can be funded through the free electricity, free 50 units of electricity, which already the government is providing. So can this be funded from that fund? Instead of providing them free 50 units of electricity, can we use this fund to fund the solar power panels, put it on the roofs of those slum dwellers, and it can be a very sustainable type of thing which can provide the electricity to those people. And people like Patrick, the transmission and distribution network of people like Patrick and their expertise can again be utilized for distributing this power, solar panel power, and the maintenance of these panels and all those things. So this is what I have. Yeah. Thank you.
I mean, short answers,
Okay,
and
very short,
then we can move to the next session.
So very short answer about the benefits and the legal system with the prepaid meter in terms of quality is much better because electricity is supplied continuously. There is no power cut. There is no variation in the electricity, so it's much better. But again, because it costs more than the unofficial Kibera power lighting company system, people do not can't make it, and so they do not agree with it, basically because they cannot afford it. And about your question, yes, I think it could be one, of course, one of the solutions. But basically, there is a need to integrate these intermediaries, these brokers, Patrick. It needs to be involved. Some of them were involved in this scheme to deal with Patrick. So you have a few cartels members who were actually involved and working with William to deal with Patrick. But it doesn't. It was not sufficient. I mean, all these transformers, all these people, sorry, should be involved. And why not? We can imagine a solar panel solution nowadays. So you have a solar which is blooming in Kenya, but in the urban areas it remains very less because there is already this centralized grid. And in Kibera, I saw a family actually who bought a pack, a solar pack to be able to bypass all the systems, the prepaid as well as Patrick, and to be autonomous. So yeah, but your solution can be, it could be one solution, I think, to think about.
Okay, thank you very much to the speakers. And how short is your question, or how long is your question?
Can I ask?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always for debate, but just a very short one.
Okay, this one is to Remy. I want to ask about the type of load that is there. If they can afford appliances like TVs and such, then they can afford electricity. And if it's not, if that isn't the major load, if the load is lighting and like for cooking and stuff, then couldn't you provide like efficient devices for that? So if like instead of, so in a way you're controlling their demand, the consumption of electricity that they're having, so you can reduce that amount, so the theft will be less.
So, but I don't understand, because the amount of electricity that they are using, you mean with the legal system? Because you control actually their consumption by with the price of the unit, the tokens that they need to buy to recharge. So
no, I'm saying like distribution of energy efficient devices, like that it's cheaper.
okay,
like
okay,
LED.
to complement the prepaid system.
Yeah.
To make them consume less.
Yeah, exactly. Did you consider that?
No, I did not consider that, but yeah, I mean, but all the items, electrical items that they have at home, it's mostly some recycled stuff, and it's not, they do not buy really new stuff, so it raises another issue, because you will have to maybe think about giving them a loan to refurnish all their electric system at home, to have something which consume less, to allow them to consume less unit with the same quality as before, so it will become very complex. Yeah.
Okay. It's a good transition to next session, because we will talk partly about potential business models to shift either demand or the way in which renewable can be provided. So we move to session 2. We don't have a break. I mean, we are imposing very tough rules, but there is tea and coffee outside, and if ever you want to go and have a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, you can just get in, get out at any time you want, rather than having it served inside. And the next session is totally in the hands of Ankit, so I'm happily disappearing from here. And